Paul Atreides, aka Muad'Dib, Usul, and the Preacher, is a central character to the Dune series. He was born on the planet Caladan as the son of Duke Leto Atreides I and his Bene Gesserit concubine, Lady Jessica. He was also the older brother of Alia Atreides. He ends up marrying Bene Gesserit trained Irulan Corrino, but did not produce an heir by her. With his freeman concubine, Chani Kynes, he was father of the twins Ganima and Leto Atreides II, the God Emperor. Last Duke of House Atreides, leader of the Freemen, and first ruler of the Atreides Empire, Paul was considered the Kwisatz Haderach, the powerful prescient being, long sought by the Bene Gesserit, and product of their lengthy breeding program. The Bene Gesserit brought Paul's parents together with the intention of producing an Atreides daughter who could then mate with the heir to House Harkonnen to produce the fabled Kwisatz Haderach, or super being. However, the plans of the Bene Gesserit sisterhood were thrown into disarray when Jessica, due to her deep love of Leto, bore a male heir to his house. As the son of Duke Leto Atreides I, Paul grew up with a privileged background on the water-covered planet of Caladan, the ancestral home of House Atreides. Though he lacked companions his own age, he did receive tutelage from his teachers, men like Thufir Hawat, Duncan Idaho, Gurney Halleck, and Dr. Yue, as well as education in Bene Gesserit methods and techniques from his mother. Shortly after his 15th birthday in 10191 AG, Paul's father revealed to him that Paul's training through his teachers had been geared toward turning Paul into a mentat. The theory was that when Paul succeeded his father as Duke of House Atreides, one of the most respected and moral great houses of the Imperium, a mentat duke would truly be a formidable force in the Landstrad. Paul's latent talents also earned him the attention of the Bene Gesserit, who tested him with the Gom Jabbar, as they hoped to salvage the breeding program through him. Paul Atreides accompanied his parents when House Atreides relocated to the desert world Arrakis to manage mining operations of the spice melange. However, when the deception of House Harkonnen and the Emperor Shaddam IV was revealed, he escaped into the desert with his mother and joined the Freemen. Upon proving to the desert people he was worthy to live among them, he took the name Muad'Dib. Paul's union with the Freemen, coupled with significant exposure to the spice melange, triggered dormant prescient abilities within Paul's bloodline. These abilities, coupled with his leadership skills, his military training, and an ancient prophecy of the people of Arrakis, enabled Paul to become the leader of the formidable Freemen. It was on Arrakis that he discovered that his grandfather, the father of Jessica, was the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. He also drank the water of life and survived, expending his consciousness and bringing his prescience near to perfection. He was the first and last male to drink the water of life and survive, showing himself to be the Kwisatz Haderach, although he claimed to be something else, something unexpected. Paul claimed, after drinking the water of life, that he could not only see the future and the past, but also the present, which he called the now. His vision allowed him to see Shaddam IV's great fleet in space above Arrakis, ready to attack. During this period, Paul met and fell in love with Chani, the daughter of planetologist and native freeman Liet Kynes. Their first son, Leto Atreides II, the elder, was murdered by Glossor Rabban Harkonnen, further fueling the existing hatred between House Atreides and House Harkonnen. After spearheading a highly effective campaign of guerrilla warfare against House Harkonnen's spice mining and their Sardaukar forces that had taken control of Arrakis, Paul conquered the powers in Arrakeen with his marriage to Irulan Corrino, daughter of Emperor Shaddam IV. He successfully negotiated the end of the long-standing Corrino Empire and his own ascendancy to position of Emperor. Upon crowning himself Emperor in 10193 AG, Paul enacted a strategy that had been revealed to him through his prescient abilities. This decision saw the theology and many customs of the freemen thrust into the whole of the empire. A result of this action was that Paul Atreides himself became a revered godhead on many worlds in the known universe. there was resistance, and Paul found himself increasingly isolated from his family and friends, as he decided that the jihad to place his view of the future of mankind in place must be bloodthirsty and relentless. Whole planets were sterilized as some of the great houses put up a struggle against Paul's relentless freeman armies. After the bloody jihad that lasted more than 12 years and claimed billions of lives, Emperor Paul Atreides eventually subdued all outright rebellion. The order of the known universe was maintained through the replacement of Corino imperial power, which was supported by Sardaukar military strength, with Atreides imperial power supported by Freeman military strength. Paul's interpretation of his prescient visions also necessitated that Arrakis be transformed from a barren desert planet into a lush and fertile world, with the exception of a small desert for the sandworm to remain alive and keep producing spice. By the end of his rule, this plan was well on his way to succeeding. This program had begun under Pardot Kynes as an attempt to harness a planet. However, under Paul, it became part of a plan to save humanity. Despite his strong leadership and formidable prescient abilities, Emperor Paul Atreides began to feel building pressure from discordant groups within the Empire, notably the Bene Gesserit, Bene Tleilax, fringe groups within the Freemen, and the dethroned but still powerful House Corino. Among the schemes of his enemies were the detonation of a stone burner near where Paul and his forces stood in Arrakeen, which resulted in his physical blindness. Upon Paul's recovery from this incident, he shocked all by his ability to see despite not having eyes. His perfect prescient abilities allowed him to perceive the world around him. Despite being able to see through prescience, doubts began to surface in Paul's mind regarding his interpretation of the future. Feeling increasingly frustrated and out of control, he began to seek a way out. That escape route emerged through the combined treachery of his enemies, a plot conceived in the presence of a powerful guild navigator. The Bene Tleilax gave him a Ghola of Duncan, Idaho, who contained a secret trigger. Concurrently, and part of the plan, Irulan slowly poisoned Chani. As the princess's toxins slowly worked their way through Shani's body, the emperor's consort died during childbirth. Immediately, the face dancer Skytel, who had been posing as Shani's handmaid, sprung into action and caused the Idaho Ghola to remember his Tleilaxu mission to kill Muad Adib. As this caused a great mental conflict within Duncan, he remembered his past with House Atreides. Immediately, Skytel realized the great scope of change that had occurred. A Ghola had recovered memories of his former life. Skytel bargained with Paul that the Tleilaxu could bring back a Ghola of Shiny, complete with her life experiences, for Paul to enjoy in relative obscurity, if Atreides would abdicate. Instead, Paul killed Skytel. After the birth of his children, Garima and Leto, Paul became convinced that he had lost his prescient abilities. He did not foresee the birth of his daughter, only his son. Therefore, as no more than a blind freeman, Paul disappeared into the desert, offering himself up to Chai Hulud, as was the freeman custom of the blind. This action made a powerful statement. It signified to the freeman that Paul's interest was for the tribe, and that even he, Usu, Paul, who was Muad Adib, was not above freeman law. Many years after his apparent death alone in the desert, and while the Atreides Empire was under the regency of his younger sister, Alia Atreides, a new figure, the Preacher, appeared from the deep desert. By urging civil disobedience against the Atreides Empire and warning of the consequences of agreeing Arrakis, the Preacher attracted an ever-increasing number of followers. Many believed this thundering, blind stranger to be Paul Atreides, as he was blind and led by a boy. The Preacher eventually revealed himself to be his son Leto, and the two of them traveled throughout Arrakis, breaching the water storage of every siege so that it could spill out onto the sand. Eventually, Leto and the Preacher returned to Arrakeen to confront Alia, who had clearly shown herself to be an abomination by this time. Eventually, rising tensions saw Talia commit suicide in front of her mother and Duncan, Idaho. During the ensuing chaos, the preacher was assassinated in Arrakeen, but not before he had revealed beyond a doubt to Gurney Halleck and Jessica that he was indeed Paul Atreides. Thus, the great Paul Atreides, son of Leto the Just, and the first Atreides to ascend to the Golden Lion throne since its inception more than 10,000 years prior, was dead, passing into legend for eons to come, laying the way forward for his son to take the Golden Path to its logical conclusion. While Paul envisioned the Golden Path, the ultimate transformation that will see his humanity dissolve into a sandworm, frightened him. Upon revealing himself to his son, Paul confessed that his desire to maintain his humanity and the fear of abject loneliness that the Golden Path would bring were too much for him. He related that he walked away from what he knew he had to do, and admired but lamented for his son who had taken on the mantle that will see humanity restored, but at the cost of his own.